From one of Australia's former leading homicide detectives, this is I Catch Killers with Gary Jubelin.
Today, I had a great chat with Liz Hayes. You probably recognise Liz. After all, she's been a television reporter and investigative journalist for more than 40 years. In that time, she's interviewed serial killers, tracked down pedophiles, and covered some of the world's most notorious crimes. During Liz's journalism career, she not only hosted the Today Show for a decade, but also worked on the iconic 60 Minutes program for over 20 years. It's a position that's highly sought after in the world of journalism. We spoke about her life and the amazing experiences travelling the world, reporting from war zones to natural disasters. I also got the gossip on celebrities she's interviewed. There is not much Liz hasn't seen throughout her career. I worked briefly with Liz as a journalist, and I always enjoyed her company, and today's chat was no different. Liz Hayes, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thank you.
Well, I am very excited having you on the podcast here. I told you the other day I was a little bit nervous getting you on, and you were going, why would you be nervous?
Yeah, it makes no sense to me at all.
Well,
why would you? I mean, truly, after what you do and did, you can't be nervous.
Let me tell you, you are Liz Hayes, and the journalist's journalist, the interviewer's interviewer. You've probably interviewed more people than I've locked up bad guys. In fact, I'm certain you have. So it's quite intimidating. So
Don't be intimidated.
I'm
intimidated. Come on, what are you going to ask?
You should be intimidated, Liz, because this is I Catch Killers, and it's about time you become accountable
Fessed
for
up.
what you have done. And when I put in a caution, you better call your solicitor. Hey, I'll make an admission. We'll get admissions out of you. I'm jealous. I'm jealous of your job as a 60 Minutes journalist for, 20 years? That was my dream job ever since I saw George Negus travelling across the war zone in the back of a Jeep with a scarf around his neck.
He was a showman, our George, wasn't he?
They certainly, the start, when they started 60 Minutes, it had such a profile.
Yeah, no, we all were glued
Yeah.
to the telly because, let's face it, it was like, wow, what are they doing there?
Yeah.
What's George doing on the back of a truck with that scarf around his neck in the desert?
It was exciting. It was exciting stuff, wasn't it?
It was, and it was for me too.
Yeah. Oh well, we're going to talk about that. We'll cover that, and there's plenty to talk about. In fact, I've prepared my notes, but I don't even know whether I'm going to need them because there's so much.
I hope not. The best conversations, you don't require them.
Oh,
I always make notes. I make a million notes. And
Yeah.
You've seen me, and then it all happens. You just go with the flow.
Well, it's nice to have it. It's your little safety net,
It
isn't
is.
it? If you crash and burn, and I go, "Hello, Liz," and you've got nothing to say, I go, "Oh, right,
Bad
okay.
talent, get her out.
Okay. So, why did you get into journalism?
I knew it was a whole lot better than the Forestry Commission. The clerk's job that I had.
Liz, you're on $40 a week.
I know. Well, it was a good government job, as my dad would tell me. But I thought I would die at my desk at the Forestry Commission. I'd only been there for a few weeks, and I knew, oh God, this is not for me. But it paid $40 a week. That's right. But journalism, when it came, even though it was only $30 a week, it was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's me.
Well, it's a secret to, I think, a good life if you can enjoy what you're doing for work and get paid for it. Isn't that, I would hate to have a job where I didn't enjoy going to work.
Totally. When I think about it, I actually don't think I've worked a day in my life.
Well,
There you go.
I'm with you on that, Liz. I loved every day I was in the cops, and I'm loving what I'm doing now. And I go, oh, this is good.
Correct.
And sometimes when I was in the cops, you go away on holidays. I think, what am I going to miss? But
and that's the trick. Of course, we've had long, hard slogs in our jobs, but ultimately, it's felt so good to do the work that we've been doing that. Yeah, it's not like, I've got to get out of here. This is terrible.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep harping on the fact that I'm jealous that you worked on 60 Minutes for over 20 years and got to travel the world and cover all these amazing jobs. But anyway, we'll let that go. You have you've spent a long time in journalism, as you said. What changes have you seen in journalism over the years? How has it changed?
Do you mean in terms? Nothing's changed about telling stories. That stays the same. It's like policing, or and now you're telling stories. Stories don't change. It's the way in which they're told, I think, and how you get them out. Podcasts we never heard of. Computers in my day, we didn't have a computer. I certainly didn't have a mobile phone. I mean, I came from notebook and pen and a typewriter, manual. Not even a plug-in typewriter. So just in terms of how to deliver the stories, I think is about the only thing that's changed. Of course, maybe the other thing that's changed is that everybody's a bit of a reporter now, because if you've got a mobile phone or something, you can record something and you can send that in, and suddenly you're reporting or you're capturing a moment. So technology is, I think, the thing that's changed journalism. I don't think fundamentally it's changed that. Beyond that, I think there's lots of fads. Tabloid journalism has always been around. Maybe celebrities have captured the market. I don't know why we're obsessed with celebrities, but we are. Yeah. So that sort of stuff. I mean, once upon a time you would never see the news bulletin start with Kim Kardashian, but it does. Even though there might have been a bit of a nasty train accident up the road, I mean, that sort of stuff startles me a bit. But in terms of journalism, no, I don't. I think the fundamentals haven't changed. It's, lots of stuff around the edges has changed, but I think telling stories is still what it's all about, or informing, or calling to account. That's that's the good thing about journalism. I think it is all part of democracy, I think.
It does play an important role, doesn't it, in keeping people informed. We're going to get into how you got into journalism, but before we do, because the podcast is I Catch Killers, I've got to put a little bit of crime in. Can you tell us about a case that you recall or had an impact on you?
The killer of Zahra Baker, the Australian girl who'd had suffered cancer, and she and her dad went over to America because he found online Lisa Baker, and she
stepmother.
She was the stepmother. She'd had 7 husbands, and he didn't know that she wasn't divorced. But anyway, she ended up killing this little Zahra Baker and chopping her into pieces. Yeah. So I interviewed her. And I swear to God, that woman, wow. Yeah. Wow. I did come away going, wow. There's no part of her that's taking responsibility for this. Even though she pleaded guilty, she's not taking responsibility for this at all. She's, wow.
What, trying to explain her crime? Or
she didn't do it.
Oh, right, yeah.
No, she pleaded guilty, but that was so she didn't go to the get the death penalty. And she just said, I didn't do it. And I feel really sorry, and I'm so sad. I really miss Zahra, and it's just like, wow. The evidence, her own lawyer told her, the evidence is so overwhelming. Yeah. There's not a chance for you here.
I've met more than I care to remember of those type that, no, I didn't do it.
And she did the fake tears and the whole thing and, no, ma'am.
And I think it's almost they get to the point where they convince themselves, like not that they truly believe it, but they're just going to keep this narrative going no matter what. Like you can produce, there's a photo of you killing the person. No, it wasn't me.
That wasn't me.
Yeah.
No, I was kind of shocked at how hard she was going to go for I didn't do this. Yeah, yeah. Well, who did?
Did you break it down, Liz?
I tell you what, the guards who were there, when I was that vaguely pleasant, but not really. The guards who were there at the time, they went, this is not going to be a nice, like this is, do we have to bring in reinforcements? Because I truly thought, I just can't listen to you do this, Yeah. But I came away from that going, I just don't understand how anybody could do that to a little girl, I guess. And killing's one thing, but mutilating, cutting them up is another, hiding the bits in the bush, all that. I just can't get my head around that stuff. No. And I don't know why women do it, we know, and
yeah.
she did. But I don't know. I always think that's a big step for a woman. I don't know why I say
Well,
that.
it's a big step for anyone cutting the body up, and it's not easy. But yeah, it's. I think there's a misconception that women can't do those sort of violent crimes, because I've seen enough women do that. But the jury even find it hard to convict someone of a murder if it's a person that looks like their mum sitting there in the dock. So it's an interesting take. How have you stayed so grounded? In the time?
Blame my mum and dad. You know, and
right.
I've got 4 brothers who all tell me I'm just Beth Ryan from Taree. And I am. Truly, I think it's that fundamental upbringing with lots of people around me who are just everyday people. I have always viewed myself as lucky, but I took opportunities. I was prepared to take a risk. But ultimately, I was not good at buying into the bullshit. Because I was a bit frightened it would go tits up anyway. You know, it would be like, God, if I blow my trumpet now and out of my arse next week, it's just going to be embarrassing. So I've always had that in the back of my head. You've got to be a bit careful.
And that you think that comes from your childhood, like growing up? You grew up in Taree?
Which is, only
it's
just
topical
still
at the moment.
Yeah, still very soggy. Look, it breaks my heart when I see that. And I'm a dairy farmer's daughter, and seeing those cows washed down a river and turning up on a beach is truly, I can understand, it's just awful on so many levels, but also, so many families' houses are gone and our old farm's gone and all that. But yes, country town upbringing is really interesting. Everybody knows who you are, and whilst that's good, it can be bad. But ultimately, it's just basic. You know, you're in a small community. Consequences are quick.
Well, you're held accountable in a small community because everyone knows everyone's business.
Yeah, and you learn very quickly what community spirit's about, the good, the bad, the gossip, but, how powerful it can be to support your neighbour and what it means to take care of another human being. And look, and judgment is always there, but sometimes being quick to judge is you come to realise that that's painful and that's hurtful and that's wrong.
Yeah.
So... it's a combination of things, but we were never allowed to be arrogant.
And it does hold you in good stead, because the positions that you've had within the media, you could lose your base.
Absolutely. And I think when I first, particularly at Channel 9, I mean, Sam Chisholm was very good at making, he created this star staple, if you want to put it that way, and it was. I could see how easy it was to get lost in all, swept up in that.
Caught up in it.
Yeah, because and for me it was like, what? I mean, this is all crazy.
Yeah.
But somehow in all of that, I managed. And you know what? A lot of my colleagues are from country towns as well.
Yeah.
In journalism.
Yeah. Well, you've got to be a little bit robust too, like especially with your work in 60 Minutes. Some of the places you go to, you
got to be robust in media. Let's face it.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You've got to be able. If you're a bit fragile, I don't like your chances. And I wasn't necessarily imbued with enormous confidence at all.
Well, you displayed your confidence very early in the confessional box, and this is I do my research before we did my research, and I think you're 8 years old and following the Catholic faith and sent to confessional, and you got in there and told the priest that I have no sins.
I did, and the story is that he happened to be my mother's uncle, the priest. It's a country town. We're on an island, one little church, and the confessional box is in the corner without a roof on it. It's just a little.
So everyone's listening.
Everyone's listening, and he shouted at me. I said, I had the audacity to suggest I had no sins because, as I said, I hadn't killed, I hadn't stolen. I couldn't imagine. This week was pretty clear as far as I could see as an 8-year-old, and he just shouted back at me, "You are fighting with your brothers," because he'd been staying with us, and of course he was right. But I just thought, oh. Wow. An 8-year-old's being...
Well, I like that you were staunch, because I'd collapse under the pressure. I've never been into a confessional box, but Jesus, if the big fella's looking down at me, I better tell the truth.
Well, all I know is that it stayed with me. I have to tell you, I did think, how bloody harsh was that?
Yeah,
That was a bit cruel.
That is cruel.
And I just thought, if that's what you do to an 8-year-old, my goodness.
Yeah. Another part of your childhood, I could have been interviewing you here as the former gold medal winner as athletics.
It was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. My father thought that
But your father thought.
Oh, my dad was, look, I was a very good runner. I was a sprinter. I wasn't a stayer,
Yeah.
I was a sprinter. And I was very good in my little circle.
Yeah.
And I was a winner, and I did get to state competitions. But I was outgunned totally by those who turned up. I was barefoot.
Right.
The Zola Bard of Oxley Island. But, the others turned up with, spiky shoes. It was like, anyway.
Well, what was it called? Oxley
Island.
Well, don't diminish that. If you're the fastest...
I was the Guinea Flash there for a while, which was another little community up the road, So I was a big deal. But I think I lost my ticker. And I felt I was a bit lazy. Dad had me running behind the car.
Well, and you're a sprinter, not a stayer, but Cliff Young chasing the cows around the paddock. You could have...
I did look at him later in life and thought, thank God I didn't continue.
That could have been me.
No. I felt good that I might have changed direction.
You found that you're ostracised, probably too strong a word. One of the schools you went to, you didn't fit in. They weren't your people.
Yeah, look, and there you go. It's a very small community, but there we were on this little island. Yeah. And then we went to town, which is where the town was where I went to high school, because the island actually had its own school. I was one of 3 kids in my class. So
where'd you come in the class? Did they
always, one of the first 3.
In the top 3.
Yeah, the top 3. So yes, no, I experienced a little bit of what I guess now would be considered bullying.
Yeah.
And I it did set me back. I did think I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
It really rocked me. And my grades went down. But Mum and Dad sort of picked up on something and determined that I should change schools. And I hadn't spoken to them about it because I was a bit embarrassed.
Yeah.
I felt a bit, like, I'm not good enough and I can't let on.
Difficult time, isn't it?
It is a really difficult time as a kid, particularly. Yeah. And I'm a pleaser.
Yeah. So you want to be. I want to be one of the cool kids.
Yeah. Well, I want people to like me.
Yeah.
So it's a really terrible time.
But you found your tribe at your next school.
I found my tribe. They were just, kicking around balls in the playground, just like me. They were good country stock, let's face it, and no airs and graces. It was, this is my tribe.
Okay. So we've got your career in athletics has not panned out the way you'd hoped, and you'd upset the priest by not being true in the confessional. You've changed schools. You leave school. Did you ever consider journalism? Was that a passion?
I was always fascinated because my dad always loved the news.
Yeah.
And we always, the newspaper always arrived, and, no one was allowed to touch it until Dad had finished with it. And when the news, and we got a television because Dad was a champion sailor and won a television. And I started to see news on television because that's what we were allowed to watch. I never thought in a million years I'd be doing that, but I was fascinated by news. And, of course, in the dairy, the radio's on and the news comes on. So somehow or other, all that might have filtered through. But I didn't anticipate I could do it until, ultimately an ad was in the paper.
And tell us about that, your start.
Well, even that went well to begin with. I applied for the job, which was a cadet journalist at the local paper at the Manning River Times. And Kenny Mack, the editor, Kenny MacDonald at the time, basically said, well, we're looking for a sports reporter, and you're a woman.
Did you point out?
You're a girl, I think.
Did you point out what a good runner you were?
I never even got that far because he said something like, "Well, how do you reckon you'd go at the football match? Because everyone knows that all the good interviews take place in the dressing room, and you can't go in there." I said, I could wait till they came out, Anyway, I didn't get it, and ultimately, they hired a big burly rower. I think he was from Sydney. I think he was a great guy, all that, and I think everybody decided he couldn't spell. or whatever. And he and the editor determined it was a great idea for him to really pursue his career elsewhere. And so I got another call. Well, actually, my mother ran into the editor walking down the street, as you do in a main street of a country town, and said, do you think your daughter might be interested in applying? So Mum came home, and Mum was the star of our family.
Yeah.
She knew that that's probably what she would like. So that's probably what I would like. And off I went. Of course, by then I was working for the Forestry Commission, earning $40 a week. And Dad was like, that's a good government job. And Mum's like, well, journalism could be interesting. It was $30 a week.
Yeah.
Dad was like, you're kidding me.
Why are you leaving you could be working in the Forestry Commission.
You
could stay there for your life.
That's exactly where I could have been.
Isn't that important? Like your mum, and you're attributing your mum to pushing the kid to take a little risk. As a parent, you can think, I don't want them to take a risk, but what a great mum that encouraged you.
I think if I was
because it's changed your whole life.
Oh, totally. My mother would speak to me under the Hills Hoist and say, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Don't think you've got to get married. Don't think you've got to do... She was pretty on the ball about, as a woman, as a young girl, how I should be allowed to see my life, not to limit it.
Yeah.
And she was pretty conservative, but at the same time, her cues were coming from her own life, as far as I could see. She too didn't want to stay at home. She wanted a job.
Yeah.
She wanted to get out. She was a personality. She had brains to burn in many respects, and she wanted to use them. And I think she didn't want that for me to be, tied down necessarily if I didn't want that.
Yeah. Well, that's I think that's great advice, and it shaped your whole career.
Well, she allowed me to open the gate.
Yeah.
And, in a country town, I did what I probably would not have normally done. I got out.
Yeah.
I mean, mind you, I did marry. But
quite a few times, but we won't go into that.
I know.
There's
I
no
should have just gone out with a lot of people.
Yeah, there's no judgment here.
It's
We
so
all
good
make
to hear.
mistakes, Liz. Yeah.
Well, I don't even know
But
if they were mistakes.
sometimes they're not mistakes.
No,
Yeah.
I don't even know if they were
Evolve.
mistakes. Yeah. No.
Okay, so you're working there. In your book you talk about your first reporting court experience was pretty funny.
Oh, it was pretty awful. It was day one of my cadetship, and I was told I'd be sent up to the court. I'd never been to the court before.
I have no idea what
I knew nothing about police authorities, nothing. It was totally intimidating, and it was up the hill, of course. You've been there, the Taru Court, which is next to the police station. The Catholic Church is right beside it, where I went to school, where all those bullies were.
Yep.
For a period of time. And I just remember walking up that hill with my notebook and pen thinking, oh my God. But my editor, before I walked out the door, just shouted, don't forget to bow. I was like, what? I couldn't, I felt like I can't turn around and say, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh no, that sounds, I'm stupid. Well, I can't. So we're going to have to work that out. So I got up there and of course I was bowing.
Yeah.
Hello. Doing a lot of bowing.
Bowing to it.
Bowing to everybody. Got inside and finally the clerk of the court came up and said,
Will you stop bowing?
Yeah, will you stop that? Will you just bow to the magistrate when he comes through the door? It was like, oh my God, no wonder everybody's having a little bit of a chuckle.
Yeah. And I could just imagine the young, fresh journalists and the old hardheads, legal people around there, the cops, everyone would have just been going.
Well, first of all, I was a girl. I was a girl. I'm 17.
Yeah.
So you can imagine I've walked, that is a man's world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back
Most then,
definitely.
Yeah, 70s, we're talking, it was a man's world and there was no way. And I was out of place, basically, as far as they were concerned, except when they heard I was from the local paper. And then I can see them almost thinking, push over, sort her out later.
And so how did you go with your stories? You enjoy it, like writing?
I did, because it was a whole new world for me.
Yep.
And I actually found some nice people who did tell me, you can check out the list beforehand and you can see who's who in the
little
zoo.
hints like that after they laughed at you for a month or two.
Yes, exactly. I got a few hints and I got to understand court hearings, and I was fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I do recall being so fascinated that I was sitting there and the children's court issue came up and the magistrate looked at me and I'm looking back at him and he says, "Get out." It's close court. And I was like, "Oh, sorry."
So they gave you a bit of latitude.
Oh yeah, no. They came to know me and they came to be nice to me. But and of course it's small. You know everybody.
Yeah.
It's a local court. I mean, there were lots of people driving through committing crime, which was always helpful. But when it was a local, you just actually, in a small community, that's it. When they're driving fast up that highway and there's a big accident, and there always was, you always were worried that you would know who that was.
Yeah, that's true.
And in the courtroom, you always felt, please God, don't make it one of my family.
What was that charge? Okay.
So it did, and of course the inevitable did happen. Yeah.
And you had to report on someone you knew.
Yes, I had to report. I was sitting there, and I did see this on the list. This woman whose name just didn't register with me. I don't even know, and it was up on fraud. Yeah. And I thought, and I was sitting there. I thought, oh, okay. And in came this woman. I went, oh my God. I'm her bridesmaid coming up in the next month or two. And I just remember thinking, oh. Anyway, I wrote dutifully down all the details and she kind of looked away and I just thought, oh my, I don't even know what I'm going to do here. But anyway, I wrote it all down and then I got back and I thought, I'm just going to bang it out. Yeah. And then, of course, before my bum even hit the seat, she's ringing me to say, please don't report this story. Please, don't tell the family. And B, don't report this story. And I'm like,
tough spot.
I'm 18. I'm barely, and I just said, because one of the things I was told I had to present all the stories. I wasn't to pick and choose.
Okay. Well,
I was told that very quickly.
But it's a lesson in a small environment, but you would have encountered that. There's a lot of moral decisions to make in journalism, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that because things are black and white in law, but sometimes people's behaviour falls into categories that you just go, God, does that make them entirely bad?
Yeah.
You are constantly making decisions about how to deal with something,
how to report it.
Yeah. Is this where you, in your case, perhaps caution? I don't know, or is this a place where you go up to somebody and go, look, I'm going to have to tell this story, but can you tell me why? Maybe, or something. Just it is a constant ethical battle sometimes.
It's funny you say that because I know when I first came into journalism and policing was black and white to a degree, or what I was doing as a detective, locking people up. So, someone's done something bad, you investigate it, lock them up if you can, move on to the next one. But when I came into journalism and, I've been asked to write a story on this and and I'm thinking, okay, well, which do I slant it this way, or am I objective enough to write a story? So a lot of grey area in journalism that I didn't realise. And I know media get the kicking, but there's there's some unethical people in there, like there is in the cops, but there's a lot of ethical people in there too. I've seen people that I respect in the media really, reflect on, okay, should we tell this story? Shouldn't we tell this story?
Yeah, and you might be thinking about the long-term consequences for that person. Maybe it's a mental health issue or something, and it is you are having to determine whether it's in the public interest.
Yeah, well,
that's a killer. Yeah. Because ultimately there's a lot of stuff that's not necessarily in the public interest, and that would fall into a gossipy department.
Yes.
Is that really in the public interest? Is that something we're all going to benefit from, that we will all learn from, that we'll all go, gosh, we should change the law or do something as a result
because of that?
Yeah. But no, it isn't always black and white.
And for an 18-year-old, fresh out of school cadet, there would have been a lot of difficult decisions.
It was frightening. It was hair raising, and it was Anyway, I turned up at the wedding. I wore the bridesmaid's outfit. But the story was written, and she did have to tell the family. And look, and everybody got on with it. But it was that was my first hard lesson actually.
Yeah.
But I had to assess whether I was up for this.
Yeah. It makes sense. How long did you stay there?
Many River Times. I was there for about 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, well that's a good grounding. That's an apprenticeship, isn't it?
A cadetship is. That's exactly what it is. But in a country town, I always tell people wanting to get into journalism, because usually they want to start at the top. They want to read the news at 6 o'clock. But ultimately, I'd say if you can get a foot in the door, because everybody wants to be a journo.
Yeah.
But, if you don't want to go to uni or whatever, but in my mind, if you can get a practical job, if you can get a foot in the door of a country town newspaper or radio or television, that's a great place to start, because you'll be asked to do everything.
Yeah. It's good advice, isn't it, really? Getting that grounding.
And you will make mistakes.
Yeah.
And you will learn in that environment potentially without suffering too many...
Too much damage.
Yeah.
And you become more robust too.
Yeah, you get to understand.
This is the way of the world.
And you know how to ask questions. You'll learn what are the questions,
What brought you to Sydney?
Oh, a husband.
Okay. You're finding love?
No, I was already married. My first husband was offered a job he was a builder and come to Sydney. So I thought, why not? Yeah, of course.
Yep.
It's his job. And I didn't have any serious issue with that. In fact, I saw that as, okay, well, let's see how it rolls.
Give it a go.
Yeah.
So you came down here with the intent of getting involved in journalism
Well,
or the hope?
Yeah, I didn't think that a country town journo would measure up necessarily. I didn't have high hopes, but I did think that I should give it a shot.
Yeah.
So I applied, for jobs to everybody, including Ita Buttrose, who said, thank you, but no thank you. But fair enough. But I kept banging away, and I think I said I spent a lot of time sitting on a beanbag watching the telly.
What happened to beanbags? Beanbags were good.
Beanbags are back. I don't care what you say, they're back.
They're not really stylish, but they are comfortable,
They
aren't
are
they?
comfy, aren't they? Yeah. They
Big
look,
beanbag,
they look
just
terrible.
fall into that. I don't know how you dress it up, but
They don't
bring
know
back
either.
the beanbag. Okay. Hard-hitting issues that we discuss on eye-catch killers. But they were good. They were very comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're down there, but you did get a start.
Yes. So I got into magazines, and then the editor, which didn't go that well necessarily. I'm not good with celebrities. I just am not. And this was a magazine. Oh, actually, the magazine I was to write for was Signature Magazine, which was for American Express people who were expecting, very high-level articles on wine and accommodation. Art. I had none of that. But they also did TV Week and whatnot. So anyway, I wasn't great with asking people,
Instead of writing the wine, there was reference in the book, you actually drank the wine.
Well, I was sent
One
out,
stage.
Yes, I was sent out to do a story on this new organic vineyard out at Mudgee, and no one told me I had to spit it out.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, look, another one.
But and of course, we started after I had a piece of toast and Vegemite. It was that early, and it was, and I did thank my photographer, because he said, "Look, I'm just going to take us all down to get some shots in the vineyards while you sit down."
Time to leave, Liz.
Yeah.
Time to leave.
Yes. It was very funny. I mean, I just don't know how anyway.
Well,
I learned well.
Yeah, you've got to fall so you can get back up and
It was hysterical.
take a step
I remember
forward.
thinking, wow, how to get drunk on the bloody first job out of town.
So how did you find your way in the TV world then?
So the editor of that particular group of magazines was made the head of publicity at Channel 10.
Yeah.
And even though he had to sack me, he did ring me at the magazine. He did ring me. I think he knew I think he just knew I was a decent person, and I was trying very hard. So he said, "Look, would you like to come and join me in the publicity department?" He was taking a couple of people with him, and I thought, Yes, of course. I've never been to a television station in my life.
Yep.
And of course, it wasn't good at publicity either. Just not my thing. I was a storyteller. I was a news storyteller. And so he was the one that thought, I can't sack her again, I'm sure that's what he was thinking. He spoke to Tom Barnett, who was the news director of the time, and Tom came up and declared that there was probably a position in the newsroom, and I had great pins.
Well, that's from your running career.
And of course, I can understand why he said that,
and
because I was a runner.
And that was perfectly acceptable in those days.
It was perfectly legitimate. No. Yes, it was.
You couldn't deny it, could you? If they said you had good pins. Well, that's true.
Well, in this, you and I can laugh about this, but in certain circles you can't laugh.
Oh no! Well,
you've got to say how terrible that was.
That's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Red flag.
Yeah.
Anyway, back then, I didn't blink. I just said, my pins and I are coming to the newsroom. So we did. Down I went. And I learnt the art of broadcast television down there.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty quick learning experience as well. But it was great. And there were some fabulous people there who really helped me understand.
And were encouraging you and guiding you.
Totally. Get out of that purple weave frock. That's really ugly. I mean, I learned that was the confronting bit. Was oh no, I've got to be on the telly.
Yeah.
And I hadn't perfected the art of looking good in any shape of the imagination.
And when you're in front of the camera, like you critiqued on everything you do, how you speak, how you pronounce a word, how you look, and more so for a female than a male. Like how do you look? It's you have to have.
It's exhausting, isn't it? How did you go?
Well, my hair never helped, but
I like your hair.
Oh, thank you. But you've got to be robust, and I don't think people understand the pressure of a live cross. Like if you do a live cross and you're standing there, there's all this noise in the background. You're going to be beamed in live. And
you want to get one go.
You've got the piece in your ear that you can't hardly hear what's been said, or it's coming in a second late, and all sorts of things. So, did you have any bad experiences with your in front of the camera?
Oh, I'm sure I had a zillion. But ultimately, I've got to try and remember if there was any at Channel 10. Ultimately, no. I just had to get my shit together.
You and your pins.
Me and my pins. No, I just had to. I just had to learn. I just had to pick my game up and work out, watch others and see where I was going wrong. I mean, I think it's important to see your own work.
Yeah.
And go, whatever.
I can improve on that.
Oh, 100%. So I got through, but then I got poached to go to Channel 9.
Look at you! You're on the because of your pins again.
No, it came on a phone call, so I don't think anyone had seen my pins at that point.
Yeah.
But and Channel 9, of course. When I walked in, I knew this was like because they were at 10, they were having a great time.
Because 10 was, I won't say what's a big deal and what's not, but 10 back in that time when you were at 10, they were a pretty big deal in TV world.
They were, but they had a lot of young new people and a lot of, it was, the first time they had a double head news of Katrina Lee was the female reader, and it just had an energy and a vibe which was, it had a fair bit of spirit.
Yep.
But when I arrived at 9, it was like, ooh, okay, this is very serious business.
You notice a different culture.
Totally. And not a lot of reporters, but those entrenched, serious, been around for a long time reporters, and Brian Henderson, Hendo's sitting
icon.
there.
Yeah,
of course. And so that's when I thought, oh, okay, I've got to, get into serious mode here.
And did you really have to apply yourself to it? Like, did you go home, critique, practice?
I wasn't. No, I wasn't that kind of person where I practiced anything. Yeah. But I realised, okay, I've got to take. I've got to step up. I've got to. I've got to exactly. I can't just think that's good enough, or just feel lucky I got through. I'm now going to have to make it that I always will get through. That I'm going to make. Lift my game to that point where it's not an issue sending me anywhere.
Right.
But I had to, I had to get I had to get on my game.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that the pressure, because it's a spectacular fall. The more you become known, it's a big fall, and if you're not in the good books, you're out of the industry very quickly.
Because it still was a man's world, and still I was the only woman. In fact, I was replacing the only woman who'd been there. So it still was, I was still a bit of a token. I could tell. You could tell. The place is not full of women at all. So if I'm the only one here, all right. Why? You figure it out, but you don't want to just be, the token woman.
Yeah.
You do want to show that you're worthwhile. You have a reason to be here. You're valued.
You've earned your right there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when did you get offered to read the news? That was further down the track at 9. After I'd been there for a couple of years. Yeah, they asked me to read the news, which was just like, what? I've never aspired to read the news. It was like, oh my God. Anyway, and by that time we were in a new newsroom and everybody was sitting around you. Yeah. And you're on a desk in the middle of them and you're nowhere to hide.
Oh my God. Truly, I think I could have had a stroke.
Well,
I
understand. You would be nervous.
Yeah.
Like news, you hardly see anyone stuff up on the news. And if they do, they've been there for 20 years, and you forgive them. But
no, you're not allowed to. Yeah. No, you've got to be word perfect, basically. But back then, also the auto cue was paper, and Sylvia was feeding it through this machine, and so on the screen up comes the words on the paper that she's feeding through. But then it would get stuck, and her hand would just come up on the screen, and that would be all you could see, and you'd be like, in Sydney this afternoon, and it'd be like, when that happened, that was the end. Yeah, that was the end.
Did you, like in reading the news, did you keep yourself aware of what you were reporting on, or were you basically just reading off the auto cue?
Well, at that stage, I was just having to sort of get the auto cue sorted, and it was. So we had a morning news, 11 a.m. news, but we also had an evening news. Right. And we would get a call to say, the news tonight will be 2 minutes long and it'll be at 10:10. And be like, or the news tonight will be on 9:30 and you need to fill up 40 minutes. And,
okay.
And there were just the two of us. And we were like, oh my God.
What are we going to talk about?
No, well, we would drag up the news from the 6 p.m. and, revoice a lot of that stuff. But it was a great learning experience, and, we just made the best of it. But yes, then broadcasting became something I understood better.
So you're still carving your way through the career, and these are all what you consider a step in the right direction on what you wanted to achieve, or were you just having a look at the whole industry?
I didn't have a game plan. I just didn't have a game plan at all. I was still coming from a place of, wow.
Wow, how do I find myself here?
Yeah, oh gosh, really? Because, again, that confidence, I didn't have, a massive amount of confidence. Yeah. So I was always a bit surprised, and I'd be like, oh, and then I think, yes, I can't say no. I should say yes to this. And I knew I was taking a risk.
Okay, but you had the courage to take that risk.
Yes, I always felt like I didn't want to regret saying no. So I was taking the risk, so I was prepared to do that. And then and it happened with the Today Show as well, because I was asked to fill in.
Well, the Today Show takes it at another level, doesn't it? If you're and you hosted the Today Show for 10 years?
I did. But I came in filling in for for Patrice Newell, who was the co-host at that time with Steve Liebman. And I would fill in. But you know what? I sat in that seat and felt immediately comfortable.
Felt right for you?
I couldn't. I was shocked, actually. Quickly, I don't know why. I mean, I was aware, that I had to sort of, bring my A game to that as well. But I don't know. It was at that time in my life, it just suited me. Yeah. The hours didn't.
What type of wake-up call? What was the alarm?
Oh, was it like 3 a.m. or something? Yeah. And poor old Geraldine from the reception at 9, her job was to, back in the day, I don't think they do that now, would ring you,
make
say,
sure you're...
morning, Liz. And
make
I'd
sure
be like,
you're up or have gone to bed.
Yeah. Oh, God, that was
Yeah.
just the terror, because I was not good at going to bed early. I mean,
Yeah.
you want the sun to go down,
Yeah.
don't
yeah.
you?
Well, you meant
Mostly. So, but I loved the Today Show.
Yeah.
But of course, the Today Show is really where I really came to understand me.
Yeah.
I had a few marriages in that time. I was doing this live television. I had a Kerry Packer, somebody I came to know, Sam Chisholm, who was, my God,
Heavy hitters.
I was now in this world, and I didn't have a manager or anything like
Yeah.
that. We didn't have managers, and I just and I had to fight for equality, in how we were presented on the show, but also pay. I never got equality, but I had to fight for a pay rise and stuff like that, and I think that that was good for me.
Well, it would certainly toughen you up.
Sure did.
Yeah.
It sure did.
How did your life from a personal point of view change when you became such a public figure? Because you really, if you're hosting the Today Show and the way the Today Show ran, how did that impact on you?
Well, as we see today,
Yeah.
the Today Show and those breakfast shows have people. You're there every day, pretty much. So you become very much front and centre in this world of. Well, we don't have royalty or anything like that, so we're about the only celebrities.
Well,
back then, particularly, that.
You're the person we wake up to.
Do you know people used to bet on what colour I would wear? I've been finding these people are coming up to me. Oh, hi, Liz. Do you know what? Back in the day, we used to have betting at work about what colour you were going to turn up in.
They should have given you a tip. You might have made a bit of money.
Yes, I might have. But first of all, I had to come to terms with being so public. I didn't appreciate how public that would be. Secondly, I wasn't the smartest person because my private life was now going to be very public, and I really should have got a bit of a better grip on that. And just generally, who you are, that's an internal conversation you begin to have. Who am I? I'm out there, well, the media, whoever's decided to have a go is having a go, and I'm now questioning: am I that bad? Is that really how I'm seen?
Yeah.
Am I really awful? And it's a really terrible time to have to. And I was 30. We went from 30 to 40 years of age in that period, and I took a few tumbles in terms personally. I just went. I had a couple of marriage breakdowns, and that was all that was being discussed. Plus, I had found myself with a stalker.
Yeah.
So everything was out of kilter there for a while, but the constant was my job. The constant, the thing that anchored me was getting up at that hideous hour and turning up and being with people who were very supportive. And Steve Lehman was like the most stable man in my life, other than my dad. But
I know what you mean.
Suddenly you're constantly aware of yourself.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of myself quite like I had been before, and everything about me was up for grabs.
So you had to become comfortable within yourself when
I had to find it.
Yeah.
I had to, and my parents played a big role in that. A couple of times when I just thought, wow, I'm falling down a crevice here.
Imposter syndrome, did that sort of, how have I got to this point? I shouldn't be here and I'm going to be discovered?
I don't, you have a little, everybody has a little bit of that, and I didn't think about it like that. I just felt like, I don't want to embarrass myself or fail. Yeah. But of course, I think I think normal people have moments where they go, gee, I hope I don't, ruin this moment. So I think that's common. But it was a time when I had to smarten up again on a personal front as well as on a job front. Yeah. And to have a pretty strong conversation with myself about who I am, who I want to be, and how I was going to negotiate this, if I was going to stay in it, how I was going to negotiate it. So you know what, I took, everybody thinks it's hysterical, but it's not. I thought I'm going to disappear. So I joined 60 Minutes.
All right, yeah. No, that's good. If you hide out in the open. No one will find you.
No, but what it meant was I was not around as
Yeah.
much.
Okay,
I was
yeah,
just
well-
not that daily person on the news or on the Today Show.
Yeah.
I was not at home being found by paparazzi or anybody else.
Yeah.
I was able, no one knew where I was, and you just take yourself off the dial. And it worked.
Okay.
It,
Yeah,
believe it or
I see
not,
what
it
you're
worked.
saying.
It
It's not-
doesn't. It doesn't stop headlines. I know that, but that daily grind, people knocking on my neighbours' doors
I
asking
think
what's happening.
My take on morning TV, it's almost like we own you. Like
Yeah.
if you get up and the TV's on, you're getting. Yeah, well, I see you every day. It's so I can understand.
It's
what
the
you're
view.
saying.
The viewers are fine.
Yeah.
The viewers are usually fantastic.
Yeah.
Although you'll get those who
Yeah.
you constantly tell you how terrible you are, but it's really that which goes with it.
Yeah.
You know, that public, outing of you on so many levels. Like you look terrible today.
You make a mistake, it'll be on the front page.
Yeah,
and,
another marriage over or whatever. It's as a human being, it takes its toll.
And like going through those relationship separations or a marriage, it's painful enough. But if it's out in public, and then geez,
it is
nowhere
awful.
to
That is
hide.
awful. And I'm very sympathetic to anybody who finds themselves in that position
Yeah.
because I've been there and I know it doesn't matter. You can't go and knock on everybody's door and say it's not true or whatever.
Yeah.
You just have to suck it up.
You have
You
to
know?
you'd toughen up to it. You'd have to. So with 60 Minutes, how did that offer? And again, I say I'm jealous because it's I reckon it's a
You should be
great
jealous.
job.
You should be jealous because actually, if I was to tell the absolute truth, it was fabulous. It was absolutely
don't
fabulous.
tell too many people. God, it
Don't
was a
tell
good
anyone.
gig.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I think the secret's out. People go, that's a cool job.
Yeah, it looks
So
like a good job.
how did that come about?
Literally, Peter Meakin, who was the head of News and Current Affairs, rang me and said, would you like to join 60 Minutes? Tracy Curo, who was the reporter at the time, was leaving.
Yep.
And I thought, can I do that? So there's your slight imposter syndrome. I had that moment of,
Because you could be taking on a head of government or all sorts,
Oh,
any story.
Well, I had reviewed this program, so I knew that even though the Today Show was fabulous at teaching you how to get to the core of the subject in 4 quick questions or whatever, because you had to, and it's live and there's no turning back. I knew that I was stepping into a place that I really would have to dig deep into conversations and really know my stuff and all that. So, but I did see it as it came for me at the right time. 10 years was enough. But also, I felt like I just couldn't. I'd been divorced.
Yep.
And I just thought it's time
Okay.
to take this next risk in life.
All right. And it's not a risk. It is a risk.
It's a
I
slight
suppose.
risk,
It's a challenge.
but
Because you could go on there and for whatever reason it just didn't click and
it does happen.
Yeah.
Some people come to 60 Minutes and not so much reporters as, although that can happen, but because it's an ecosystem. There's producers and cameramen and sound people, and what was required of us back then, it's changed now. I have to say, because COVID changed everything, but we would be out there forever.
Yeah.
And you'd be travelling with 3 other people, and you just have to make that work.
Yeah.
So it didn't always. It didn't suit everybody.
And I think there's there's the fun times, but in the times I've been away of 60 Minutes, work hard.
Yeah.
Like it's I was very impressed. Not surprised, but no, we've got to get this shot. Well, that'll be another 2 hours. Yeah, let's do it. And I see everyone really roll their sleeves up and get into it.
People are always surprised at how long it takes to shoot a story, and it is because you're going to all that trouble to get some really interesting pictures and angles, and there's a lot of black holes to fill.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of behind the scenes work that takes place, so it is a lot of hard work. When I was there, I think we were blessed. We had a very good budget.
Yeah.
That wasn't an issue. And
I heard people whinge about in the old days.
Well, and we should never talk about the old days because it's hurtful. But
the tears, don't start crying.
It's
Where's the
hurtful
tissues?
to others.
Yeah.
But no, in my day it was fantastic. But I think even today, it's tough.
Yeah.
Like all media businesses, it's not so.
No,
Business class travel is
changed.
not on the agenda. So, but we could go anywhere in the world, but we always had to come back with a story.
Yeah.
But there was some pretty shitty places we went to.
Yeah, I was looking and people to get a sense of the amount of travel you do.
Oh, I could be away easily 6 weeks at a time. And go around the world, a couple of times and change producers a couple of times.
Well, I'm just, and this again from your book, and this is talking about one particular time. Just one itinerary had me covering the cloning of Dolly the sheep in Scotland on the 26th of March, then travelling to London, New York and Los Angeles, eventually landing in Miami, where slightly hungover and somewhat starstruck, I interviewed the Bee Gees and loved them. That's in brackets. You must have really loved them. On the 8th of April. I reported in Bogota Emerald Mine on the 11th of April, then Afghanistan on Anzac Day. On the 5th of May, I was in Pakistan. 3 days later, I was sitting down for lunch at one of my favourite beachside restaurants in Sydney.
I know.
That's crazy travel.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. And, it wasn't until I kept a diary.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
I don't know why I did. You know why I did? I do know. I was trying to keep up with what I had to be doing. I'd be like, so what am I doing now? I'm going to where? That's why I kept the diary. But I would write things on the way because it just kept me vaguely entertained. But even when I went through my own diaries again over those 25 years, I did think, what the hell? Yeah. I do recall it being... But I was excited and exhilarated by it at that time, so I didn't mind. And I think at the end of one trip, I arrived home from around the world and changed bags, got those clean undies in, and went straight over to do Dolly Dunn.
Well, that
the next day.
I think that was in the same year.
Yeah.
You've travelled to Moscow to interview the astronaut.
Andy Thomas.
We're going to speak about the astronaut. I always wanted to be an astronaut.
Did
if
you?
I couldn't be a 60 Minutes reporter, an astronaut sounded pretty cool too. Kakistan, Uzbekistan, London, Sydney, and off to Honduras.
Yeah.
Crazy travel.
Yeah.
Let's, because it is a true crime podcast, one of the stories that you talk about that you saw from start to finish was the Lindy Chamberlain case. For people that don't know, and I think most people would, Lindy Chamberlain had her baby, Zahra, which now we accept was taken by a dingo, but she was convicted of the murder. Yeah,
she was. She and her family were camping at Uluru, and a dingo literally came into the tent and took baby Zahra, who was like 6 weeks old at the time.
Yeah.
And it was one of those stories that that divided a nation.
Everyone had an opinion.
There was a Hollywood film on it.
Yeah.
Meryl Streep played Lindy Chamberlain.
That's right, with the Australian accent.
Maybe that wasn't, slightly New Zealand accent. But no, it was one of those stories that divided journalists. I'm sure it divided police. But the community generally. It really, you're right, everybody had an opinion.
What's your thoughts on that? Because the media played a big part in that, and what's your take on?
Well, my take on that is similar to Joanne Lee's.
Yeah.
A very similar story where her boyfriend, Peter Falconio, at the time were not quite backpacking because they were in a combi van, but they were in Australia from the UK having a year of working and travelling around, and they were travelling up the Stuart Highway, I think it was, and out of Alice towards Darwin. And a car came up behind them. It was dark and motioned to them to pull over, and they were of the opinion that something was wrong with the car, and that's why they pulled over.
That was a horrible case. But I know there was a lot of people had opinions about her involvement because of the way she reacted, or the perception of the way she was reacting.
I think there were a couple of things, and I think Peter's never been found. His body has never been found, and if you go out there, you can tell why. Wow, if you found him, it would be amazing. But also, Yeah, it was, I think, part of how she reacted, which is like Lindy Chamberlain, it didn't fit the mould or the expectation of somebody who would be in this terrible situation, grieving. With Lindy Chamberlain, I happened to be at Channel 10, and I remember hearing over the radio this report while I was in the office about a dingo had taken this baby, and I remember thinking, wow, gosh, because back then we'd never thought a dingo would do such a thing or could do such a thing. And I think then I was at Channel 9 when it was reported again, and the Today Show and 60 Minutes. It is one of those stories which, if it gets into people's heads early enough, they have trouble shaking the fact they might have got it wrong. And the media has a bit of trouble shaking it might have got it wrong too. You know, I think we can find it hard sometimes to say, maybe we got that totally wrong. But it was just, and maybe kept selling well. I don't know the story if you kept countering the story, but I think it wasn't assisted by some poor policing work, forensic work.
Yeah, well,
all those sorts of things obviously played into it. It's Outback Australia at the time. You know, just and I feel very sorry, but I think that Lindy and Michael at the time were religious people.
Yeah.
Whether that played into it, we were judgmental back then about a lot of things for a lot of not so good reasons, and I think that played into this narrative of it just couldn't be possible that a dingo did this, and somehow or other, you know, these are peculiar people, and something obviously went, you know, awry, and we'll say a dingo did this. You know, I had a High Court judge say to me, he's passed away now, that he believed there were questions about that case, not in a good way. And I thought, wow, I couldn't figure, he couldn't quite tell me why either, just quietly. So I think we can get prejudicial quite early in the piece.
I think because everyone had an opinion, and it was a snippet, it could be a headline or that, and people hang on to that piece of information. What with Joanna Lees, what was that about? Because I never understood why people were so...
Well, again, I think there was this you know, it's a bit like Lindy Chamberlain as well. You know, she's not behaving like she's a distraught mother, and Joanne Lees is not behaving like she's supposed to now that she's almost lost her life as well.
Being abducted in the middle of the desert and fighting for it. Yeah,
and to be honest, when I sat down with her, that woman is tortured by the fact that still today people don't believe that she didn't have something to do with Peter's disappearance. I mean, it's incredible, but I think it gets a hold very quickly, and it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be counter stories if you've got evidence or if you've got questions. I don't think you're not allowed to go against the grain. I think you can, but I think you've got to have a good reason to do it. But it never let up. Yeah. It just never let up. And I believe that that's where the media has played a detrimental role, actually, in both those cases, where it's just compounded negativity for reasons I've not been convinced that the evidence has been there to say that any of these people are guilty of anything, other than those who have been, you know, a dingo and Bradley Murdoch.
Yeah, and I think that you talk about the perception of how someone should react if they're in those situations. And that's, you know, from a detective's point of view, that was something we were always careful of, because you don't know how people are going to react in the most traumatic situation you could find yourself in. And I think there's a bit of a perception with, like a female, they should be collapsed and crying because, well, maybe they're hurting on the inside, but they're trying to be brave for, you know, support the others around them. So yeah, I found it interesting on that, and that you linked it to the Joanne Lees one, because I couldn't get that, because I thought she was reacting perfectly normal in a situation like that. Like it's
I think she was keeping herself away.
Yeah.
I don't know whether she knew how to deal with it, and she was embarrassed because there was this, little piece of gossip that got out that she'd had an affair with somebody when she was in Sydney, at the bar that she was working at or whatever. So I think it's the worst possible scenario for her.
Yeah.
And now that she's felt the need to change everything about herself to sort of escape it. But in her heart, she was for a very long time a broken woman.
And that's the sense that you got.
I totally got that. She didn't trust the media at all.
Yeah.
I sat down with her and I said, ultimately, Joanne, it's up to you how you do this, but it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably, I know you are, I can see you are, but I'm not going to make a fool of you. I just want to hear from you, and I want you to tell me what it feels like from the heart.
Yeah.
And I think she did. But did it change anybody's mind? I don't know. We weren't there to change people's minds anyway.
It's so hard. I we'll probably get this edited or legal, but the William Tyrrell case. Now, I'm obviously very close to that, but what's been portrayed in the media in regards to the foster mother that we can't name for legal reasons, I just think it's been disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. And I know the investigation, obviously, and I've watched that, and I say publicly to people, I think it's like the Lindy Chamberlain case. Like, everyone's got an opinion. There's not a day I don't walk the street and someone come up and offer, she must have done it. Why? Because of some media headline or something that the police have leaked to the media, and I just think it's been so cruel watching that play out.
I've got to be honest and say that is one of the aspects of the business I'm in, which you have to be very careful about. Yeah. And we've learnt that the hard way sometimes, where we've thought, it looks a bit sus.
Yeah.
Only to find we were the ones who had it totally wrong.
Yeah.
I recently did a story with Lauren Zonfrillo. Her husband, Jock Zonfrillo, died. And it's never been revealed how he died or why he died. He was found in a hotel in Melbourne. He was the master chef. And he was about to start publicity for his new series. And the coroner determined it was not in the public interest for anyone to know why or how, and she didn't want to say. And there was such a slap up over she had to tell people, and it was like, how unkind is that?
Yeah.
Did she have to? The coroner had determined it wasn't in the public's interest.
Right.
And she didn't want to say why he died.
Yeah.
And it clearly is a big issue for her. And it was like, wow, people are so feel they're entitled. And they take on a position and they will judge a human being at their worst time.
Yeah.
We are making judgments about people who are probably in the worst place they've ever been in their life.
Yeah.
And it's really, we have to be really careful about that.
Yeah, and I see, like, or I hear, not just see, I'm hearing, like, ill-informed comments based on what, and I'm going, but the evidence doesn't support that, the facts don't support that, but that sort of gets lost in the tide of public opinion. But that's probably the responsibility you have as a journalist.
Oh, I think as a journalist we do, and that's when you have to really probably hang on to the facts.
Yeah. Yeah,
because that's when you could, if you stray beyond the facts in cases like this, of the cases we've discussed, that's when you can get yourself into deep trouble. And I think surmising is, you just can't.
Yeah.
And I think, I think we have a responsibility to be diligent on that front.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we might take a break, end of part one. When we come back, we'll dive more into the world's best job as 60 Minutes journalist and some of the stories that you've covered there, which is quite fascinating, looking at some of the crimes that you've covered, natural disasters, travel in war zones, all sorts of things. I don't know where the conversation's going to go. But I'm also going to talk about the death of your father, because I know that was I think you described it as the hardest story that you had to tell. and the lessons learnt and the importance of telling the story about that situation. So if we take a break and we'll be back. Do I say, I'm Gary Jubelin, this is I Catch Killers? Is that...
You can.
Can I say that?
Why don't you?
Like an
More
audition.
in a moment.
Yeah. I'm Gary Jubelin and this is I Catch Killers. We'll be back soon.